This is QD Clinic. I'm Jack Cush with Room Now. QD Clinic is brought to you by Room Now Live 2022, where you integrate knowledge into practice. That is, of course, after you've attended the meeting. Today, we're going to talk about follow-up visits and when you should be seeing your patient after starting a DMARD. There's a recent report that we tweeted about this week coming from Daphne Gladman's group. Data from 2 phase 3 trials in psoriatic arthritis where they looked at the use of upadacitinib, adalimumab, and placebo, and looked at the time to a meaningful clinical response defined either by objective measures or patient-reported outcomes. And in that series, they noted that a meaningful, significant clinical response was achieved at 29, 30, and 53 days, depending on the measure. That's fast. The question is, how long do you need to figure out whether the patient has responded to your therapy or not? Let me tell you a quick story about the early days of tofacitinib. I was invited to a tofacitinib advisory board, my goodness, probably around 2009, 2010. And they presented data, I want to say it was on 260 patients with RA, treated for 6 weeks, placebo-controlled, a few doses, and I was sort of outraged. Like, they're going to show me a new drug and only show me 6-week data? What are they, out of their minds? Like, who are these people? I thought these, well, if you looked at the data, you would have known that they were not wrong at all, because they were seeing clinical responses within 2 weeks, 4 weeks. And by 6 weeks, it looked like they had data as good as anything out there at the time. And this, of course, was smack dab in the middle of the TNF inhibitor heyday. And, since then, most, cytokine-directed or biologic-specific therapies are pretty quick in their clinical responses. This has been made even quicker by the new targeted synthetics and small molecule therapies also showing benefits really, really early. So the tradition here is you bring a patient back for follow-up based on, 1, you want to see how they're doing so you can make a decision, or 2, for safety reasons and blood tests. Usually it's the blood tests that determine when the next follow-up visit is. And unlike, what we tell our patients, we have to wait and see what the blood tests show. No, you're doing blood tests to look at safety. So the usual sequence is patients come back in 1 month because they're unstable and there's a high risk with the medicine. They come back in 3 months because you're not sure how they're going to be doing. You'd like to find out, and there's maybe some risk with the medicine. But if there's no risk with the medicine, the patient's doing great, you see them every 6 months, right? So 12-week follow-up seems to have become the standard for most patient follow-ups, especially with the initiation of new therapy, whether that be methotrexate or a JAK inhibitor or a TNF inhibitor or abatacept. It seems to be that, first visit 3 months. I think that's too long, because if you look at all the data that's out there, it's very, very clear. Separation from placebo responses is highly, highly evident at week 4. Absolutely clear by week 6 and week 8. And with most of our newer therapies, you're achieving maximal responses at week 8, and they're not going to get much better. So when do you bring them back? Well, you bring them back at week 12 because that's what we always do. Now, you might bring them back earlier if you had the availability to do so. So that means that maybe you have a nurse-led clinic and they operate according to a protocol. Or maybe you're doing telemedicine. You can see them faster that way. Or maybe they have a smartphone and you're monitoring their progress that way and you can get remote labs. The problem is that none of us have any of those things and we just bring them back in 12 weeks. So the facts are clear. People who respond rapidly and well quickly are the ones who have sustained early responses, the ones who achieve remission in ACR 70 numbers. Saying, well, I need 12 weeks or 16 weeks to see the full response. Yeah, you are seeing the tip of the tail of the bell curve, and those people are not going to do well in the long run. They're going to fail and switch after 6 months or a year. And the facts also are that rheumatologists are slow to make changes in therapy because they're based on follow-up visits. They're based on, well, let me wait and see. I'm saying it's a war. The gains that you make initially are very significant and establish the trajectory of the patient over time. So response speed is another word for trajectory. You want to find out that someone responded quickly and almost completely at 4, 6, or 8 weeks, because you're then good with that therapy. If they're not responding at 6 or 8 weeks, bail, move on. Change therapies rapidly when you're starting new therapies, especially in a rheumatoid or a psoriatic arthritis patient. The current convention, I think, is nothing more than convention based on convenience and the lack of available alternatives. I think we should be driven to see patients sooner. So what can you do? Bring them back at 6 weeks instead of 12 weeks. Or bring them back at 4 weeks and then bring them back either at 8 weeks or 12 weeks after that. But again, whether it's a visit at 4, 6, or 8, you know right away whether what you did therapeutically is going to work or not. And again, patients who respond best quickly, meaning they have a very steep trajectory here as far as response, these are also the ones who achieve sustained drug-free remission. Think about it. See the patient earlier. We'll see you at Room Now Live.